2022 was Lincoln Riley's first year at USC. It was also his best year at USC, and it has gotten progressively worse each year. But if you are watching what's going on in the class of 2026 in the recruiting, you are saying the Trojans are doing something different here. They just got a commitment from Mark Bowman, the tight end from Mater Dei. Mater Dei is a massive powerhouse high school in Orange County, California, in Santa Ana, where USC used to get a lot of really good players from. And it has not been as fruitful a pipeline recently. But Mark Bowman is a 5-star tight end, 6'4", 230, number 1 tight end in this class, number 12 overall prospect in the On3 industry rankings. He just committed to USC. They've got a D tackle from Mater Dei who they flipped from Oregon, Tamuhini Tupui. The class is currently number 1 in the class of 2026. It's one of those that we'll see as more classes fill up here in the next month or so, if it stays number 1. But Ari, if it stays intact, we're looking at probably a top 5 type class, right?
Yeah, I mean, like the thing that you have to look at when it comes to the recruiting rankings in June is what the average player ranking is. And like that is more revelatory than the actual ranking because you obviously get more
right. This class has a lot of players in it relative to some of the other places that usually have high ranked recruiting classes.
Yeah, USC's class ranks number 1 overall because it has 27 commitments, and every other team in the top 15 has between like 5 and 16 is the second highest. So they're going to be number 1 by default and have a higher score. But the thing that you want to see is the average rating. That's the average rating per player. And they're at about 90-50. And like team like LSU, who's number 2, has 93-22 average rating. And, a lot of teams, that round out the top 10 are in the 91-92 range, which is a significant difference in terms of average of the quality of the player. But they have done a really good job. And I think I counted up yesterday that they had 7 players in the top 200 nationally in the industry rankings. So like they are getting a good class. And we had a long discussion too, Andy, of what it takes to actually compete at the highest level in this year's in this day's college football. And I don't necessarily believe that you have to recruit the same level of super class that you had to in 2017 in order to get to where you need to go, especially if you are a USC fan or, truther. So anyway, they put this commitment out, and I tweeted about how that's what you want to see. The 5-star tight end from the local high school, committing to your program is the secret sauce, I felt like. And I got 2 messages. And River, if you could put that back up for me for a second, from other media member personalities. And I didn't want to reveal them because I don't want to, blow their takes. I'm sure that they'll, tell them on their own shows or on their own Twitters. But the first message, and this all happened within like 5 minutes too, read, USC's recruiting class is going to crumble like Jenga blocks. And then the next message, which came like 2 minutes later, was USC is about to be back. Offensive genius coach that people left for dead, retooled defensive staff, commitment to NIL, and it's in Los Angeles. And it's like, for me, 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I was person 2. You know what I mean? And last year, I became person 1. But now I don't know what person I am because I do still love what USC has in terms of the ingredients of being great. It's the same stuff that I believed in before, which is coach that is an offensive genius. I don't think that Lincoln Riley all of a sudden stinks as a coach. I don't know if I have the same faith in him as a program builder as I do, or as I did before, but I have the same faith in him to put together an offensive, juggernaut. I think that is a bona fide set in stone skill set of his. You don't luck your way into 4 Heisman finalists. You just don't. Okay. And part of that is recruiting, but also part of that is doing, your job once they're there to get them in that position. They're in California, which is a very fertile recruiting ground. They are a sexy program, in my opinion. I feel like playing at USC is cool. They've got some of the best uniforms in the country. There's a lot of things to like. And I think the hardest thing about college football, at least traditionally, and I think that's changed a little bit the last few years, is that going to a place and how hard a job is really based on whether or not you can find a clear and identifiable plan, and not only find it, but execute it. And like USC has shown in the past that it can execute its plan by getting really good players in California and then piecing the rest of their class together nationally. So like right now, USC is going into a year. This is year 5, right? Is this year 5 or year 4? Year 5, right?
This is year 4.
Yeah.
Year 4 of Lincoln Riley.
Year 4 of Lincoln Riley. Sorry, but like year 5 of him, like kind of being in the USC, like in terms of the calendar. And like you don't want to see a team that has that much potential get worse every year. And now you're coming into the year, and what do you feel like? They're a middle of the pack Big Ten team from an analysis standpoint heading into the year. People think that they're between 6 and 8 probably in terms of best team in the conference.
Vegas has them at 7.5, right?
So that's right in the middle. And it's like, that's not what you want to see. But then at the same time, you're seeing the ingredients of what makes a program great, which is getting a 5-star tight end who has been compared to Brock Bowers away from Georgia, Texas, Alabama, and other teams. So like, to me, it's puzzling because like I have been as down on USC as anybody in the country because I had a hard time at the end of the football season saying, hey, what is the thing if you're a USC fan that you can latch onto and feel really good about as it pertains to the future? Husan Longstreet, I think, might have been one thing because you got a 5-star quarterback to come in. You know, you feel really good about that. But like, we didn't know what the program's identity was. The defensive, renaissance was good in terms of going from one of the worst defenses from an elite level school that you've ever seen to a passable one. But you don't know that you feel really great about USC being a dominant defense in the future. And their offense comes in without any bona fide, star players that are up in the same conversations with the Cam Coleman, Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams. And that's not something that you would expect in year 4 of the Lincoln Riley era. So like, what do you buy into more? And I'm very curious to know, like, what made you so fired up reading it? Do you buy into more of like, oh, well, they're going to go 8-4 this year or 7-5 and they're going to lose their class? Or do you think something's different about this? And can you latch on to something that makes you believe that Lincoln Riley isn't dead in LA?
What is the thing I keep saying about Lincoln Riley?
I don't know. What is it?
I think he's too smart to not figure it out.
Okay.
He's 41 years old. He's still younger than most people are when they get their first head coaching job. There's still time to learn and to build on the things that he does really well and fix the things that he doesn't do really well. And what we're seeing now for the first time in Lincoln Riley's tenure as a head coach is them getting top 100 players. Now, I realize what happened last summer. I realize that we need to get through these next few months, and this class needs to hold together for that to be true. Because remember, there was a situation last year where you had Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson and Drake Stubbs that were all committed, and they were from clear across the country. Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson were from Georgia, and Drake Stubbs was from Florida. And they all decommitted. Like they had all committed in a fairly compressed time, and then they all decommitted in a fairly compressed time, and they all ended up going somewhere different. Justice Terry went to Texas, Isaiah Gibson went to Georgia, Drake Stubbs went to Florida. And so I get why someone would say, this class, what's the difference? Well, I think this one's going to stick. They've made some changes that should help. They hired Chad Bowden away from Notre Dame as the GM. They certainly seem to be in the mix for a lot more people who are difference makers. And that's been the problem for Lincoln Riley throughout his tenure as a head coach. He'll get the QB, but they don't necessarily get a ton of difference makers on both lines of scrimmage. They're not getting, they're just not getting the level of player that, say, Georgia or Ohio State or Alabama gets. And when you had your initial vision of what USC would be under Lincoln Riley, Ari, I know you thought they would recruit like those programs, but they didn't early on. They didn't seem. I don't know if it was they weren't trying that hard or those people just weren't interested. And look, I realize we're going to come to the NIL piece of this. So clearly USC is competitive on the NIL front with this stuff. But that doesn't mean much of anything because Oregon's competitive on the NIL front. So is Texas. So is Georgia. So is Alabama. Like, maybe it means that USC has decided to compete with the likes of them. And if that's the case and they get those kind of players, I think there's a really good chance that they can be better. Now, here's where that contract is going to help Lincoln Riley. Because as good as this class can be, if it holds together, it can't help them until next year at the earliest, and probably not really until 2027. So does that mean you're going to have more 7-5 or 8-4 between now and then, which probably isn't going to be that satisfying? But the sort of good news, bad news is you can't afford to fire him. So
yeah, you're kind of into it.
You got to wait till these dudes get a chance to develop. And guess what? That might work.
Yeah. So here's the second curveball. And you read the story, so you know where I'm headed with this. But Charles Power, our one of our scouts at On3, wrote a really interesting story back in May 9th, my dad's birthday. Happy birthday, Dad. Why high school football factories are producing tons of recruits, but few NFL draft picks. And I think that's a very interesting thought process, because two of the most important schools in the footprint of, USC's build are football factories, right? You have, Mater Dei, which is where Bowman goes, and St. John Bosco, right?
Right. Where DJU went.
Where DJU went. And he went, and for reference, here's the track record of blue chip players from 2016 to the 2021 recruiting cycles and the subsequent NFL draft picks used in the story that he had. Mater Dei, during that period, went 2 of 4 with 5 stars drafted and 0 for 12 with 4 stars drafted, which is an insane number.
Based on percentages of 4 stars that get drafted. Yeah.
0 for 12 is insane. Okay. And then St. John Bosco, 1 of 2 5 stars drafted. And by the way, if you're a 5-star prospect and you don't get drafted, something went terribly wrong. Because if you're a 5-star prospect, you're just a physical freak that will get drafted based on potential, even if you don't have a great college career. And then St. John Bosco had 1 of 11 4 stars drafted. That means 3 out of 6, which is only 50%. And Cody Belair said, I think it's 66 or 70% 5-star draft rate. And then 1 of 23 4 stars, which is absolutely, utterly insane, Andy. And you have to go into the question of, this isn't the entire state of California, but there have been people who have theorized this for a long time, which is, even though players who go to these powerhouse programs in the state of California are ranked equivalent, they're equivalent to a lot of the players that you'll get out of the South, whether or not they're actually built and good enough to play college football at a high level and ultimately get drafted. And if your recruiting ground is not as good as the data represents, then that could also lead to problems. So it's just like, on one hand, they just got a 5-star prospect from one of the schools that we just mentioned, but their 5-star prospect, 4-star prospect draft hit ratio is low. So you can get super excited about them getting those. And I felt like the reason why USC would be awesome is because they would own Mater Dei and Bosco. But even if you own them, is that enough? And that drives me crazy, because that scares me. It's like, even if you do the clear and identifiable plan, there's no guarantee even at that point that you're going to get to where you want to go, because the public high schools in Georgia just might have better college players there. And I don't know if there's a way to quantify it.
Well, the one way I like to look is, who else is recruiting somebody really hard? Because if people that you know are good evaluators are hard after somebody, then you should feel fairly confident. You know who was after Mark Bowman the hardest?
Georgia.
Other than USC? Texas and Georgia. Kirby Smart does not give a crap what we rank somebody. Does not care. Has a great reputation of, sure, he gets the 5-star guys, but he also goes and offers Ladd McConkey, who nobody seems to want, and Kirby sees something special, and oh yeah, he's right. So the fact that Kirby wanted this dude real bad, I think there's a good chance he's pretty good. There was an offensive lineman that Florida got a commitment from over the weekend, and it was one of those things where, oh, he's a 3-star, and then somebody in the message board points out, but look at the offers. And it was like Georgia, Alabama, Clemson. And it's like, oh, okay. So maybe this guy's slightly underranked. I don't know. Mark Bowman is probably not underranked, even though he's a very highly ranked player, because everybody went after him the same way. Like, you don't see anybody, like Oregon offered him too. Ole Miss offered him. Like, everybody offered him. Everybody who's anybody was working hard to get him. I think this is probably a very good player.
Yeah, and I don't want to turn this into a conversation of whether or not Bowman himself is going to be good, because
I
don't want to
understand what you're saying, and to point out, like, Charles's story was not all about California schools. It was about the big factory schools. So IMG Academy, which is in Bradenton, Florida, Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas, Grayson High School in Georgia. So it was the ones that just pump out players year after year. And look, I think it's natural that when you've had that many players go on to successful college careers, of course, more college coaches come through every spring practice. Your players do get exposed more to those coaches. And yeah, they're going to get recruited more than players somewhere else. So,
but then there's the other thing too. The other thing too of just our California players in general is good.
Well, that's a different question entirely. And like, I always get in trouble because I always talk about the Florida player versus the Georgia player versus the Texas player. And, you know, the California players are good. The thing about, like, Georgia and Florida always were better per capita. Like, Louisiana was always better per capita. California is just a huge state. It's the most populous state in America. There's a lot of people. So there's therefore going to be a lot of good football players, but you actually have to pick through a little more carefully in California because there's just more people.
Yeah. Also too, Bruce Feldman and Tony Morales, The Athletic, wrote the story a long time ago, I think 2 or 3 years ago, but there's no linemen in California either, which is a major problem.
You know why? Everybody's too healthy.
Everyone's too healthy, and there's the beach.
I did a story years ago. I want to say this was 2010, because I'd asked Chip Kelly when he was the coach at Oregon, what's the hardest position to recruit or to find good players at? And he said it's like finding a ready-made defensive tackle, like a guy who can come in and play right away. Those people hardly exist. They're very rare. And he said, especially on the West Coast, it feels like they're all in the South. And I looked for, I called anthropologists, I called sociologists, I looked at all these different demographic data. You know what did it? You know what overlaid perfectly? I took the hometowns of every defensive lineman in the NFL and made a map. I found a map that matched it perfectly.
What was it?
The obesity map.
See, that doesn't make sense, Andy, because the best offensive linemen are big, but also freaks. Are you saying that the freaks in California play linebacker because they're too healthy?
No, what I'm saying is the places where they're more fat people, most of their kids are going to be fat too, but sometimes their kids are just big but not fat.
But there's no correlation between general natural size and obesity.
No, but if you are a larger person in general, bigger's bigger.
I know,
you meet a bigger person,
but being
bigger
fat,
people tend to hook up with bigger people.
I mean, maybe that's true. I guess I don't know. I don't think that, like, if you're an overweight like I'm an overweight person, very less so than I was a year ago.
I'm just telling you, the obesity map matched perfectly.
I know.
Perhaps it's wrong, but I bet if we did it again in 2025, it would still work.
There's no correlation between obesity and the size that you're supposed to be naturally. Like, being obese is you put on extra weight on a regular sized frame. What I think actually is happening is that the lifestyle and the health standards and the just generally wanting to look good in California is different. So if you're a big person or a big freak that came from that,
you need to look up Lamarck. Ari, you're like Lamarck. Lamarck's the person who thought that brachiosauruses had long necks because they had to stretch to get the good leaves on the trees, or giraffes had to stretch to get the good leaves on the trees and their necks elongated. That was Lamarck. Darwin got it right. Darwin understood that the longer neck giraffes mated with longer neck giraffes and survived to mate with longer neck giraffes because they could get the leaves that were higher up on the tree and thus more likely to survive.
I think that you're more likely if you're an athletic.
That's evolution with Andy and Ari.
Yeah. I didn't know who the other guy was. I knew who Charles Darwin was.
You don't know Lamarck because he was wrong.
Well, you know him because you're a freak. But the thing that I wanted to say, though, is that if you're a big person in California, you're more likely to play tight end or linebacker because you're athletic and healthy. Whereas if you are a big person in
Mississippi,
Georgia or Mississippi, or a place that's higher on the obesity map where that you're not California cool and wearing Quicksilver, then you're more likely to lean into getting bigger and bulkier and playing offensive line. I don't know. Like, there's got to be a theory. There's no. What is the other reason? Like, is the population in California generally smaller and less athletic? That can't be true.
I doubt that. I don't think it's a case of like the Balkan states have taller people in general than other places. Like I'd say our population in America is somewhat normalized. I don't think it's that different from one region of the country to the other.